So I was just saying, look, it's nice to see everyone. I've been, I don't know, it'd be close to 25 years. I was actually trained as a 100% risk-only advisor, and my father was absolutely prolific in the industry, initially with Prudential. And so it was pretty tough times. Everyone I knew was already a client or family members, friends. It was very challenging. And he was the antithesis of nepotism. Everything had to be earned. We transitioned. I went to the UK for almost, it was about 7.5 years to 8 years, and did my tertiary studies there, worked in banking and so forth, and came back in at the end of 2001. Bought my father's practice in 2004 and transitioned immediately to strategic advice. And I'll share my screen here. If you could just give me a thumbs up or some that you can see that in full screen. Is that all right?
All good.
All good. Excellent. Thank you. So, and I did that, and what I was going to go through here, I'm going to try and condense to about 40 minutes into about sort of 12, just so we can leave some time, so we can open up and discuss this stuff. What I'm going to particularly go through is in relation to pricing advice. I call it the MDRT shield. Yes, I just made that up, but I'll explain what it is and why I think it's a key variable to pricing of advice. And I'm going to go through a really simple structure that we use with pricing advice and how you can apply this to strategy, investment, even risk. And I'll then actually give you some case studies where I'll even show the documents like a statement of advice and reference to terms of engagement, so you can see that, and also just touch on a checklist, which I can make available to you if you like it, on how to stop undercutting yourself, all hopefully in about 12 minutes. So let's get straight into it. I think the first thing for me, which is absolutely crucial with, one of the really good things with MDRT, is maintaining high levels of conviction. I know this really helped my dad in the past. It certainly helped me. And I think it is, look, it's a very negative time period, particularly in Australia. And so it's good to lean on each other and share, and hopefully this will help give you some confidence. But it's just something I think you should check in regularly. Probably the most harrowing experience of my career was doing the life insurance claim for my brother almost 10 years ago. And when I reflect on that, particularly if you think of this in relationship to the pricing of advice, the impact is extraordinary. Scotty's been hunting for his family for almost 10 years, every rates bill, every holiday, every meal on the table has been provided by him, and the miracle of life insurance, which is pretty extraordinary. So I do have really high, I already had high conviction. I didn't need this to have it higher, but it's good to remember the incredible work I think that we do, and particularly even with, retirement planning, happy clients, those sorts of things. So it seems an obvious point, but gee, it's easy to lose sight of it and get dragged down. And so with that in mind, think of it when you're pricing advice. What did we do? We just filled out some insurance, yes, we use Risk Researcher, whatever, today when you're looking at things like that, or if it's a retirement planning, cracked out a few numbers, had a bit of a discussion. People don't really value processing. What they do value is what's of value to them. And if you can tap into that, and I've been talking about this for a couple of years, it seems to be a bit sort of buzzy at the moment. But the really important bit is this here, where we're talking about what's the impact of your advice. So keep this all in mind for pricing advice. If your positioning of the discussions, if your terms of engagements, your statements of advice and so forth are focusing around of what's of value to the client and the impact, you're going to the ability for your fees to rise. If you're focusing on what you're doing, generally it's going to be pretty low. Look, your cost to serve is crucial. Everybody knows that, but they should know that by now. And having a minimum fee, and I'm going to show you a structure in a second, which is just how we use it. It's a simplistic format. But there's a magic around this sort of focus, a real deep focus on value. It's similar discussions to what you have in the past, but it's just going that little bit extra, a little bit like with risk. If I use that, one thing I learned from my father was to go really deep on the problem. Don't just leap at the solution and go, oh, here's some cover. That's where people go, well, that's great, I'll think about it. Well, you really do need to actually, explore that further. And so eventually what you end up with is this multiplier effect. I'm going to show you, I'm going to go through one case study, but there are 6 there which will show how our fees have increased 167% by just this simple change. Now, that it affects your revenue immediately, but it also has a wonderful effect on your business value. So I really believe the new world's all about value, not volume. So just briefly, you've got to consider these things when you're pricing your advice, and just think to yourself as you're looking at this, do I actually factor this in? Some things are basic, some things are more complex, but then some people are really easy to get along with, some people are special. So I think you need to be pricing and accounting for that, because that does have an impact. And then finally, the one thing that I find over and over with a lot of advisors we've worked with, you get people with 20, 30 years advice, but they're pricing effectively like a first year. Like if the equivalent of a senior legal sort of partner, price accordingly. So you should be factoring that in. So ultimately, we want all these things, right? You want to have a system or a process that allows you to basically be confident, but to lean on it. And what I do is this system I'm going to show you right now, unbelievably basic, right? There's no bells and whistles. That's why I think it works so well. I actually blame it, and I'll show you how I do blame it, or I lean on this. So what we're looking at here is a really simple matrix. When I was talking about knowing your cost to serve and having a minimum fee, I do believe that one of the issues with pricing that advisors do is that they actually just have one minimum fee. What we're talking about here is having, let's just briefly mention, we've got a base level, a mid-range, and a higher level. And we have 2 minimum fees. The first is just the minimum for any work, which I can give you our numbers is, and the reason there's a question mark here is there is no right or wrong number. The right number for us is 3,900, and it's about to go up. But the higher one here is 5,500. So what I'm saying there is I've got some wriggle room for mid-range advice of about $1,600, and then there's no cap, right? To infinity and beyond, depending on the complexity. And this can be applied for strategic stuff, for retirement, or for protection. So let's look at a real case study. This is a guy who came with a self-managed fund, a little bit of complexity, but he said he was unwinding it. Really what he told me was, he just said, look, I just want you to help me roll over. I've got to get these funds. I'm selling a property in my fund, and I'd like to just go into a retail fund. Could you manage it? Help me set up a pension, that kind of stuff. So that in itself is really pretty basic. If I'd focused just on that, the work would have been a lot lower. We found out that obviously he did have an investment property in France. My wife's French. He was wanting to give it to me. They've been losing money, absolute dog of an investment, even though it turned out that they loved it. So that was what they wanted, pretty much just a straight over rollover. But what we found is that they really wanted to unwind a lot of this complexity. They wanted a more simplistic approach. There were some inheritance issues. They were receiving an inheritance on top of this. They didn't know how that affected them. But they actually loved this French property and wanted to keep it. And ultimately, what came out by going really deep is they had a deep-seated fear that they'd enjoyed life a bit too much and they hadn't put enough money away. And this isn't a technical discussion. These guys just nailed it. They actually have spent so well that they're around that sweet spot where they'll get the maximum from a government pension and be able to top it up. And they don't really, they don't need too much more money beyond that. So if we actually just have a look at, well, how do we apply this particular case? Now, in the first instance, and I think this is I hope you don't mind me using this parlance, but I would say the sale, everybody seems to be missing the strategic sale, and they would just do the rollover and give a lot of advice for free and just get paid on some sort of formula. What we did here was we said, well, look, here's our little base. First thing was they weren't ready, right? They had to sell this property and unwind it. But we needed to know where they were headed before you go, well, where would you invest it and all those sorts of things. So the considerations were these here. I'd actually said to him, the leaning on this, I said, look, if I give you advice on your self-managed fund, which you've already said you want to unwind, it's $5,500. So let's not do that. Why don't we spend that money or position some of the money more into getting some good answers as to where you're headed in the future. And so there was some basic Centrelink stuff. And then obviously down the track, there was a basic rollover. So what we did was, this is how we present things. So what you've got at the top is, this is in the terms of engagement, key results and outcomes. I'm not going to read through these, but you can just see it's all high level stuff, right? I'm not saying we're going to fill out some forms and we'll consider tax, and nothing like that. And instead of, I call this a series of yeses. So instead of just saying the old, so would you like to work with me or not? I'm going, how best would you like to work with me? So in the first option here, we're just setting up a base. We're going to do some core planning. This is like our control, if you go back to science at school. And then the second one, and that one we said, look, we've got to keep in mind, there's no products here, right? There's no ongoing fee. This is just giving some answers to the things that are keeping them up at night. And then the second one, we said, well, if we dig deeper, look, it's another $1,500. So it'll be about $5,900. Okay, pretty straightforward. So how do we present that? Well, we went back and we reiterated all these sorts of things, kept it at a high level. I said, look, if they wanted to just do the rollover, I'm not the guy for them, because I thought it would be, I genuinely don't believe you'd be doing it correctly if you're just taking the money effectively, without having done that planning first and knowing their overall position. And so what does it look like? Well, we say here on our terms of engagement, this is on the next page after those options, see, it's just the initial engagement, analysis, presentation. We are not covering anything else at this point, right? We're just trying to get the answers. And they ticked option 2. The smarter way now, which we're doing, is I actually have that at 1,500. I don't have the higher number, so it's the 4 plus, in this case, $1,500, right? So that was that. They took option 2. They were very happy, got deep into the numbers. They realized that they're actually in bizarre world of Australia being rewarded for having spent all these years. And they're going to have a pretty good retirement position. But now we had the super. So how do I price? This is just a straight out, much more transactional kind of piece, right? So the key considerations here, we just had the super. And how do we invest the funds? We did a dollar cost averaging strategy. There was a little bit of salary sacrifice. And I went, you know what? It's actually pretty basic.
Yes, what I said. Yeah, it's fine.
What is it, 20?
We're all good? Okay, I'll carry on. So we went, you know what? This is pretty straightforward. Somebody, you might want to just mute your microphone. I'm getting some feedback. So we just chose, it was a basic fee, right? Our basic fee, plus there was a little bit of complexity, not much, but just a smidge with the other property. So we made it 4-4. And then we had to go, well, what do we do for an ongoing position? Now here, frankly, we do not go hunting in this space. Most of our clients are around here, and there's a mid-range around here. But the vast majority, like 95%, are all at this sort of level up here. This is really an older number. I'm honouring promises my father made, and that's fine. I'm cool with that, but I'm not wanting to add too much to it. But what do we do here? Well, look, this guy actually was he behaved well through all this first sort of stuff. So I knew it wasn't a difficult client. It was going to be a rollover. There's a little bit of strategy sort of stuff there. And so, look, we chose just to bump it up to that mid-range, even though the actual advice, the ongoing advice is pretty low. And I should say we're using model portfolios. I'm not doing all the active management with that. And I recognized he was a good sort of influencer and so forth. And so I don't know, this thing seems to be stuck here, but you'll see this in a second. And it was 3,300. So what did that look like in our statement of advice? You see, well, there was our 4,400. And now 3,300. And can I move that to, yes, here we go. If I move that to the top, you can see here, I believe a lot of people undercut their fees. I know that at these levels, our business is profitable, but what I can see here is that, as you can see, I've upgraded them. I've said, look, normally, if we're doing strategic advice, we'd be charging 5,500 a year. Look, that's already built in terms of we've got that base. So we were giving that and we left it at 3,300. So that was that case. Now, if you actually look at it over the 6 cases that I referenced, the one that I just talked about was this one here. If we'd looked at just what we were doing, we'd be charging about $20,000. But because we focused on that value, positioned it correctly, used that matrix, always underpinned that minimum and went up, you can see obviously some of these fees are a little bit higher. That case was 13,600, not 5,800. You can see our fees, I should say, these are all real, legitimate, genuine cases of varying levels of complexity. Those 6 cases went to 53. So basically 167% gives you another $33,000. which is nice. We're happy, we can keep servicing our clients, and our clients are happy because we've actually answered the questions that they really value. Let me just click. This is the last thing I just wanted to show, and then we can open it up. I think the worst thing that most advisors do is they listen to themselves. So what they'll do is they'll put, have you ever had this discussion before in your own mind, right? You say, right, it's $8,000 because that's what my calculator said. Good. And then you put it in there and you're about to present it and you go, I think it should be 6. Okay, look, they've given me some referrals. Yep, we'll make it 6. We'll make it 6. And then you go, yep, 6. Okay, no less than 4. No, okay, 375. That's it. We'll do it at 3750. That'll be good. I'll be cool. What I do with this checklist, I do use this myself. It's just for 2 reasons. One is I stop and I ask these questions. You know, am I best placed? How? What's the value over time? And this peace of mind. What it does is it gives you that conviction I was talking about to remind yourself that really, I should say this is downloadable, but really, you know, the value of the work that we're doing is pretty high, you know, over a much longer period of time. Most of those numbers I looked at would be covered with a little air conditioner. I've been absolutely stunned recently. I did a thing with Tao. I couldn't believe advisors are charging for risk advice in many cases. On average, I think it's less than $1,000. I mean, I just don't know how that's even possible. So I hope that has made sense. And with that, I do have some other things I could reference and so forth. But I thought, if you like, I will stop it there.